Make yourself strong enough to survive alone, not because you'll be alone forever, but because there will be days, whether you like it or not, when you have to walk through the dark by yourself. There will be quiet seasons, when no one texts, no one checks in, and no one stands beside you. But that isn't the end. That's the beginning of real growth. Because when you learn how to stand without applause, when you stop relying on recognition to feel worthy, from that moment on, no one can take your strength away. We're often taught how to work in teams, how to connect, how to love. But rarely are we taught how to sit with ourselves, how to embrace silence, or how to find light within when the world goes dim outside. And that's what we're going to explore today. If you've ever felt left out, overlooked, or like no one truly understands you, let this message be the mirror that reflects the strength you've always carried within. Share in the comments, what was a moment when you had to stand alone, and what did it teach you? Don't forget to subscribe if you find value here, and come back to listen again. Not once, but as often as you need. Because strength doesn't come from hearing this once, it comes from practicing it every day. 1. Solitude is preparation, not punishment. The biggest tree in the forest doesn't grow in the shade of others. It stands alone, taking the brunt of the wind, the full force of the rain, the harshest glare of the sun. And because of that, its roots grow deeper, its trunk stronger, its reach taller. You must begin to see your own solitude this way. Not as rejection, not as failure, but as foundation. Because there will come a season when your phone goes quiet, when no one checks in, when the table has only one plate. And in that silence, the mind plays cruel tricks. It tells you you've been abandoned, forgotten, overlooked. But the truth is quieter, deeper, and much more powerful. You are being forged. Most people fear stillness because they have never learned to master it. They run from quiet moments, flood their minds with noise, and keep company just to avoid facing themselves. But what if you stopped doing that? What if you chose to see every moment of solitude as sacred? Because that's what it is. A private gym for your mind, your discipline, your soul. I had a friend once, the kind of man who lit up every room, always surrounded by people. But when life struck, when the job disappeared and the crowd faded, he fell into a kind of paralysis. He didn't know how to function alone. But that storm gave him something no success ever could. It introduced him to himself. He rebuilt not from praise, but from practice. Not from support, but from silence. He learned new skills, sharpened his discipline, and reshaped his identity. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. And maybe that's where you are right now. Wondering why life has pulled you back. Why is no one clapping? Why does the room feel so empty? But ask yourself, when was the last time you gave yourself undivided attention? When was the last time you stopped chasing applause and just listened to your own breath, your own thoughts, your own truth? See, real power doesn't come when you're surrounded. It comes when you stand still and realize that solitude is a mirror. It reflects not what you show others, but what you hide from yourself. This is not punishment. This is personal training. You are being equipped, not for a quiet life, but for a stronger one. And that strength, the kind that lasts, cannot be borrowed. It must be built. The world may applaud your highlight reel, but it will test you in your lowest moments. Will you collapse when no one notices your effort? Will you quit when the room stays silent? Or will you keep going, precisely because you've trained for this moment in private? Solitude is not weakness, it's a decision. A commitment to rebuild without witnesses, to grow without validation, to become unshakable, not because life is easy, but because your roots are deep. And deep roots are not formed in noise. They are formed in stillness. They're formed in early mornings when doubt whispers, but you rise anyway. In long nights where you learn to carry your own weight. In decisions that nobody sees but define everything. So the next time you find yourself alone, stop asking what went wrong. Ask what's being built. And don't waste that silence. It's a rare, powerful space. A space most people run from. But if you can learn to stay, to listen, to practice resilience there, then you'll carry something inside you that no applause, no company, no approval could ever give. You won't just survive solitude. You'll walk out of it emotionally unshakable, with a mindset so grounded it no longer craves permission. You'll know then what few ever discover, that being alone was never the danger. depending on others for your strength. That was 2. When you no longer need comfort, you become a threat to mediocrity. Some people can only move forward when they have a map, a voice guiding them, and a green arrow blinking on a GPS. Without it, they hesitate, second guess, and stop altogether. Others walk with no map, no instructions, just a deep trust in their inner compass. They don't need external validation to make a decision. They don't stall at every fork in the road. They move because something inside says, go, and that voice is louder than doubt. That's the difference between those who wait for comfort and those who've trained their minds for clarity. When you stop needing comfort, applause, or affirmation to act, you step into a different category of strength, one that the world can't measure and mediocre minds can't understand. There's a man I know, not famous, not flashy, not credentialed, no degree on the wall, no approved label by society. But every morning at 5 a.m., he wakes up, makes his tea, opens his notebook, and writes his goals. No one sees him, no one claps. He's built 3 businesses on discipline alone. When asked how he did it, he says, "I stopped waiting to be understood a long time ago." That's the kind of strength that comes when comfort is no longer required. He doesn't chase convenience. He doesn't wait for motivation. He simply moves. And that movement disrupts people who are still waiting for permission. Your presence alone begins to threaten those still addicted to softness because you remind them of what they could be if they stopped hiding behind excuses. The truth is, comfort can make you weak. It teaches you to reach only when it's easy, to push only when someone is cheering, to rest the moment resistance shows up. But greatness doesn't live in the comfortable. It lives in the uncomfortable. It lives in the early mornings when no one's watching. In the long nights when everyone else has quit. In the stretch of silence where you keep building even when no one notices. When you become that kind of person, the one who acts without reward, who shows up without applause, you become something dangerous. Not to others, but to everything small, soft, and stagnant within yourself. And that's when things shift. You'll notice people start pulling back. Not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've evolved past their limits. Your discipline becomes a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable when people are avoiding the truth. That's why the stronger you grow, the lonelier it may feel. But that isolation is not punishment. It's confirmation. Confirmation that you no longer bend for comfort. You no longer seek permission to keep going. You're no longer available for small thinking, reactive energy, or the praise addiction that keeps most men stuck. You've stepped into the quiet confidence that doesn't shout but never shakes. That's a threat to mediocrity, because mediocrity depends on comfort to survive. But you've learned to outgrow comfort. You've trained your mental muscles to thrive without it. When a man no longer needs to be coddled, he becomes untouchable. He walks through chaos with calm. He works through setbacks without panic. He rebuilds in silence and doesn't explain his process. He no longer waits to be saved because he is the one who shows up for himself. This is emotional self-mastery. This is the mindset of quiet resilience. And once it's built, it can't be faked and it can't be stolen. The man who no longer seeks comfort doesn't just survive, he leads. Not with noise, but with stillness. Not with hype, but with depth. And when the world finally realizes what he's become, it will be too late to catch up. Because while they rested, he refined. Don't make a stage for people who don't deserve a seat. There comes a time in every man's life when he must confront a hard truth. Not everyone clapping is clapping for you, and not everyone sitting front row deserves the seat they've been given. We often confuse generosity with surrender. We keep inviting people into our lives long after they've proven they don't value the space. We keep handing out backstage passes to people who only show up for the highlight reel, never for the hard nights. And the saddest part is, we do it not out of love, but out of fear. Fear that the room will be empty. Fear that silence means failure. Fear that a life without a full audience isn't worth living. But it is. I remember a neighbor, a man who once threw himself a birthday gathering. He cooked everything himself, set the table with care, and decorated his porch like it mattered. Over 20 people said they'd come. 2 showed up. I saw him the next morning. He wasn't bitter. He looked at me and said, "At least now I know who's real." That wasn't weakness. That was mental strength. That was clarity earned in silence. Because truth always shows up when the crowd thins out. You don't need to get angry, you don't need to retaliate, you just need to rearrange the seats. Clear the space, cut the noise, let the echoes fade, and if the room goes quiet, good, that silence will become your teacher. That emptiness will introduce you to someone you've ignored for far too long. Yourself. You'll begin to hear the quiet voice that never needed validation. The one that whispered through disappointment, through loneliness, through every goodbye. Keep going. You won't need a crowd, you'll become your own. The mistake so many make is this: they treat their life like a public stage. They allow anyone to walk in, criticize, comment, take, leave, and return. No filters, no boundaries. They leave the door open and wonder why the room feels chaotic. But you are not obligated to host anyone who doesn't respect the space. You're not a stage for lost voices to rehearse their lines. You are the message. You are the show. You are the content. And anyone who can't sit in stillness and receive what you've built, they don't need a ticket. Not everyone is meant to be part of your evolution. Some are simply passing through, there to test your boundaries, not to honor them. And when you finally stop performing for people who only watch to judge, a powerful thing happens. You begin to perform for purpose, not for praise. You begin to lead yourself, not entertain others. That shift changes everything. Because once you stop placing your peace in the hands of people who can't hold it, you become unshakable. You stop overextending. You stop apologizing for your standards. You stop shrinking to make room for others who were never willing to grow. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk out. Let them label your silence as arrogance. That's not your burden to carry. What matters is this: your life is sacred ground, and not everyone should be allowed to leave footprints on it. So if you find yourself surrounded by empty chairs, don't panic. That's not loneliness, that's clarity. And if the whole room empties out and only you remain, then say what you've always been afraid to say. Because this time you're not talking for applause, you're speaking from alignment. You're not building for others, you're building from within. And that kind of foundation can't be shaken because it's not made of people. It's made for a purpose. 4. When you stop waiting to be saved, you start discovering yourself. There is a quiet desperation that creeps into the lives of those who wait too long to be rescued. You can see it in the man who never speaks up because he's hoping someone will read his silence. You can feel it in the person who stays in the wrong job, the wrong relationship, the wrong city, because they're waiting for a mentor, a miracle, a moment. They walk through life carrying an invisible sign. Please save me. Save me from my confusion, my fear, my loneliness, my own indecision. But life has a way of staying silent when you expect it to speak. And sometimes no one comes. No hand reaches out, no answer appears, no validation shows up in time. And that moment, though brutal, is the most honest gift life can offer. Because it's there, in that stillness, where a man finally meets the only person who can truly save him. Himself. The story never begins when someone else steps in. It begins when you stop outsourcing your strength and start reclaiming it. I once heard about a man who stood in the middle of a parking lot, rain pouring down, phone dead, car broken. He looked around, no help in sight, no one to call, no one to come. And he laughed, not because he was fine, but because in that absurd moment, he saw it clearly. He had always known what to do. He just never believed he was enough to do it alone. That's what waiting does to you. It robs you of motion. It makes you a prisoner of hope, not the hopeful kind, but the paralyzing kind, the one that convinces you to sit still until someone else makes the first move. But what if that person never arrives? What if you are the very answer you've been asking for? When you stop waiting to be saved, everything shifts. You stop romanticizing rescue and start practicing resilience. You stop assigning your peace to people who don't even understand your battles. You stop delaying growth for the possibility of someone else showing up and doing the work for you. Because no one's coming to pull you out of that bed at 5 a.m. No one's coming to say you are worth it if you don't first believe it yourself. No one's coming to silence the inner critic that only you can confront. This doesn't mean you won't have love or support or connection. But it means those things are no longer requirements for your survival. They become gifts, not guarantees. And that's when you become dangerous to the status quo. Because a man who doesn't wait to be saved becomes the architect of his own power. He begins building when others are still asking for permission. He acts before applause. He decides before the consensus is formed. He learns to trust the quiet voice within, the one that knows the way but has been drowned out by noise for too long. You don't need a cape. You don't need a title. You need discipline, self-respect, emotional strength, the kind of inner clarity that doesn't flinch in solitude, the kind of mindset that says, if I must walk alone, I walk anyway. So stop scanning the horizon. Stop rehearsing your pain in the hope someone will hear and fix it. Begin. Move. Reclaim what you gave away when you believed your value depended on being chosen. You don't need to be chosen. You need to choose yourself. And once you do, the world changes. Not because it suddenly sees your worth, but because you finally did. 5. If it costs your peace, it's too expensive. There are things in life that drain you so slowly, you don't even notice until your energy is gone. A conversation that lingers in your chest long after it ends. A name that flashes across your screen and makes your stomach turn. An obligation that feels more like a trap than a choice. These are the quiet thieves of your peace. They don't scream. They don't come with warnings. They wear the disguise of normal, of friendship, of loyalty. But deep down, something feels off, and that something is what you're learning to trust. A friend once told me, I thought I was being mature by staying quiet, by accommodating, by keeping the peace. But I wasn't keeping peace. I was sacrificing myself for silence. That hit me. How many of us confuse self-erasure with emotional strength? How many times have you tolerated tension in your gut just to avoid tension in the room? How many times have you left a meeting, a dinner, or a phone call feeling smaller than you entered? That's not maturity. That's a cost. And if your peace is the currency, you're overpaying. Peace isn't passive. It isn't about candles or background music or well-filtered moments on a feed. Peace is active. Peace is the mental clarity that comes from choosing alignment over approval. Peace is walking away when everyone expects you to stay. Peace is saying no without guilt and not explaining that no for 300 words after. Peace is setting a boundary and keeping it when no one else agrees. And that's the hard part. Because the moment you begin protecting your peace, people will push back. They'll call you distant, cold, and selfish. They'll accuse you of changing, of being difficult, of forgetting where you came from. But that's only because your boundaries now threaten the access they once abused. You are no longer available for every request, every conversation, every unspoken emotional obligation. And that freedom, it unsettles people who only liked you when you were easy to manipulate. You don't need to be cruel to be clear. You don't need to burn bridges to walk away. You don't need to fight to release what's been quietly fighting against your peace for years. You only need to stop justifying the discomfort. You only need to acknowledge that if something steals your stillness, it doesn't deserve your time. You were not born to be everyone's emergency contact. You were not put here to make everyone feel comfortable while your soul starves for stillness. And if the price of connection is anxiety, if the price of being liked is exhaustion, if the price of belonging is betrayal of your own spirit, then it's too expensive. Let them misunderstand. Let them leave. Let the silence come. Because in that silence, your clarity returns. Your purpose sharpens. Your emotional self-mastery rebuilds. And what you'll discover is this: the more you protect your peace, the more power you carry. Quietly, unapologetically. Not because you need to win, but because you refuse to lose yourself. And that, more than anything, is what it means to be strong enough to survive alone. You choose peace. You guard it. And in doing so, you become someone the world can't shake. Because you finally learn the truth. What disturbs your soul is not worth keeping, no matter how familiar it feels. 6. You were set apart to lead, not left behind. There is a strange kind of loneliness that follows those who walk ahead. The ones who say no when everyone says yes, the ones who leave early while others linger, the ones who choose stillness while the world screams for attention. Society often labels them as distant, odd, or disconnected. But time always tells the truth. The same man they mocked for being too quiet becomes the one they seek for guidance. The same woman they called too intense becomes the one they admire for her clarity. Being set apart always feels like being left behind, until the dust settles and you realize you're the only one who stayed on course. A neighbor of mine was one of those people. He kept to himself, rarely socialized, never wasted a word. Every evening, he ran the same route, returned home, and read under his porch light. People whispered, he must be lonely. What they didn't see was the quiet construction of a future. 5 years passed. That same man opened his own auto repair shop, hired a team, and built something real, not with noise, but with discipline. He didn't chase attention, he chased mastery. And that is the difference between being left behind and being called ahead. One is rooted in fear, the other is grounded in purpose. Life has a way of pulling you out of circles you no longer fit into, not to punish you, but to prepare you. When the invitations stop, when the texts go unanswered, when the room grows silent, don't panic. You are not being erased. You are being refined. Because leadership doesn't start on stages, it begins in solitude. It begins the moment you stop needing consensus to move forward. It begins when you walk a path only your spirit understands and your soul trusts. Eagles do not fly in flocks. When the winds rise, they go higher, not to escape, but because they were built for altitude. So if your life feels quiet right now, if the applause has stopped, if the seats around you are empty, take a breath. This is your advantage. This is the space where noise clears so you can hear your calling, where distractions die and purpose speaks. You don't need a crowd to confirm your assignment. You only need clarity. You only need alignment. And alignment often comes with isolation, because what's essential cannot grow in chaos. You were not built to fit, you were built to lead. And leaders, real leaders, are not formed by popularity, they are forged by perseverance. There's a kind of mental strength that only comes from walking alone. A quiet confidence that grows when no one claps, but you keep showing up. That's when you realize you never needed to be followed to lead. You never needed to be seen to build. You never needed permission to evolve. And if the path looks empty, it's because you're the one meant to make it visible. So keep going. Not because others believe in you, but because you believe in the message inside you. And when the world finally turns around and wonders how you became who you are, you won't have to explain. You'll just smile. Because you'll know, it wasn't luck, it wasn't noise, it wasn't validation. It was the work you did in silence. The growth you embraced in solitude. The roots you planted while they laughed. You were never left behind. You were simply leading before they noticed. Solitude doesn't make you weak, it forges you. When you stop fearing silence, when you stop waiting for someone to validate your worth, you start becoming emotionally unshakable. Every quiet morning, every lonely evening, every step you take without applause builds something stronger inside. Mental clarity, quiet resilience, and an inner peace that no chaos can disturb. This is how you protect your energy, how you rise with self-respect, and how you build a life that no one can take from you. So ask yourself, what are you still holding on to that's costing your peace? What parts of yourself are you still dimming to stay connected to people who don't see your worth? Now is the time to reclaim your strength, not in noise, but in silence. This is your path. Walk it with certainty. If this message spoke to something in you, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. When was the moment you realized you had to survive alone? And how did it shape you? Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if this gave you clarity today, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more lessons on building quiet power and living aligned.